Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. For those of you that don't know me, and I think everybody does know me here, but I am Marcie Keithley, your host for the evening, joined along with fellow board member Beth Sturry in the Zoom room. And I think Anne's with us here. I guess because she's on the board of directors with NAAP as well. So we'd like to welcome all of you this evening. We appreciate you being here. So Beth, we're going to do a little housekeeping.
Yes.
Items first. Okay, we'd like to remind everyone that this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. So at this time, if you don't follow us on our private Facebook group, please do so because that's where Patricia's replay will be. Please remain on mute, raise your hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You may post your questions or comments in chat. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988.
Okay. We'd like to take this opportunity to remind you about all of NAAP's programming. Happy Hour comes to you on the first and the third Friday night with a variety of guests, sometimes guest hosts as well, but we have a lot of fun bringing people to you and having great discussions on Happy Hour. We have 3 other programs we want to remind you of or make you aware of in case you aren't familiar. And that would be Dr. Joyce hosts a reunion support group, Lost and Found, Then What? It's on a Tuesday night, usually the 2nd or the 3rd, and I believe it is next week on Tuesday. It might be the next one. I forgot to check, but anytime that you attend one of our groups, you will get an email notification the next time that group meets. So check your email. I often go in and just search Eventbrite, and anything that NAAP is doing will come up then on an Eventbrite search. We also have First Families hosted by Amy Seek, and they meet the 2nd Thursday of the month, and I know that will be then next week. We close out each month with Dr. Liz DeBetta's program, Migrating Toward Wholeness, the 4th Thursday of each month, excuse me. So you see there are all sorts of opportunities every month to meet with the adoption community. And that is it for me.
Thank you, Beth. Okay. So at this time, I'd like to welcome our guest, Patricia Knight Meyer. Good to see you again. We just caught up with one another in Atlanta at Cub, and some of the others were there. Who was there? Linda and Louise were there. Diana was there. Anne was there. Yeah, get your hands up. That helps. Michelle was there. No, weren't you there, Michelle? Oh, what? Okay. Well, I was going to count that spirit. Give you credit. Anybody else? Okay. Anyway, we just want to welcome everyone, and particularly our guest this evening. A lot of people already know about her and have read her work, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction and some more information about Patricia. She is a Baby Scoop era Black market adoptee, writer, and adoption reform advocate whose memoir, Wonderland, A Black Market Baby's Rise from the Rabbit Hole, which was published will be published April 2026, exposes the depth of the rabbit hole that is America's broken adoption system. Handed over along a Texas hospital curb in 1970, no judge, no paperwork, no questions asked. We all are familiar with some of that. Patricia was never adopted and didn't receive her first legal birth certificate until age 47. Part detective story, part searing family portrait, Wonderland chronicles her descent down the rabbit hole, where she uncovers extortion, trafficking, and a childhood built on lies that both saved her and erased her. There's a lot more we could share about you, but I think that's a great introduction. So welcome, Patricia.
That's a great introduction. Thank you
Yes,
so
it
much.
is. We're so excited to have you. So
Thank you. And it's great to see a lot of familiar faces and also meet some new faces. So that's also very exciting as well. So bear with me for a moment while I try to set up my screen for sharing and get into my presentation. I'm trying to ignore my dogs barking incessantly in the background and all that good stuff. Okay, great. Can everybody see the entry slide from Fog to Freedom right now? Okay, great. Okay, well, the title of the talk is From Fog to Freedom. And, I just want to start off by acknowledging that if you're an adoptee, at some point we've had fog. And sometimes we think we've dealt with the fog, and then we realize that we were just in a patch and there's more patches to go through. And the journey that I've taken from really truly being thick in the fog and just learning about, the fact that what adoption really is and that I was not a special child and all of that. Slowly that led to me finding my truth, and then finding my voice, and then finding a story. And then from my story, finding the fact that I was really drawn to be part of this community and to participate in adoption reform advocacy. And I wanted to present some, explore my path with you guys and remind everybody that you can do gigantic things in this community if you want to, or you can do what I call micro advocacy. And sometimes that's as simple as just sharing some information online socially. There's a lot of different paths that you can take. And hang on just one second. I need to minimize the faces. Did I do that or did I not do that? I'm sorry. Can you see my screen right now? Okay, that's better. And so as I'm going to explain to you my path, and then maybe inspire you to think about what you can do to get involved with advocacy on whatever level you're comfortable with and whatever aligns to your particular interests or talents, and so on and so forth. I also want to mention that a lot of people that do this work, they do eventually get burnt out on it and have to take breaks. And I've taken breaks and then I've come back in. And so, there's really no right way to go about it. But we are going to talk about all the different forms. We're going to look at the people in the community that are already doing a really great job, how we can uplift their voices, and also how we can follow in their path if that's what you're interested in doing. And I'm going to talk to you about some projects that I have going on and that I'm excited to share, and invite you guys to help me out with one of them here in a little bit. But first, I'm going to start with a little bit about me for folks on here who maybe don't know my whole story. And Marcie did a great job introducing that. I'm a black market baby. I was never adopted. I didn't get any adoption papers, or a birth certificate was never issued for my birth either. My adoptive parents used a shady attorney to skirt the system. He later blackmailed them with the threat of taking me back. They were afraid that if they went to the police, they would lose me. So they basically went what I call underground and just raised me without any papers. And that meant sending me to private school. And somehow around my 12th birthday, I needed a social security card because I was in the theater. And my adoptive father somehow returned with a delayed certificate of birth, which is different than an amended one. Basically, he said, she was born, we never got a birth certificate. We don't have any record of her birth. She wasn't born in a hospital, something to that effect. And I got this delayed certificate, which I actually believed my whole life was a good, it was a true delayed, like it was a true document, until I tried to get a copy of it at the state and they couldn't find any record of it. So that's the backstory on that. I eventually did dive into my mystery. I found my first mother at 40 years old. And at 41, she led me to my birth father. I've basically been in reunion for 15 years. He passed away 4 years ago after we had 11 wonderful years in reunion. And the majority of my time in reunion with my first mother has been, I've been estranged from her. And the reasons for that are in the book that I have coming. As you know, I did receive my first legal birth certificate at 47, and I was able to do that because I had found my my biological parents, and I had DNA and my birth father's court testimony to fix that. And as noted, the memoir that I have is coming out in April of 26. Now, a little birdie told me we like pictures, so this is a picture of my adoptive family. On the left, that is my mom and dad and me as a little baby. And on the right, this is my adoptive mom's parents, so my maternal grandparents through adoption. Oh, sorry, I'm not good at that. I keep touching the pictures, and you're not supposed to do that. It pushes you forward. The woman on the couch and the man are my grandparents. That's me. That's the little dog Baby. My parents named their dog Baby before I came along, probably because they wanted a baby. And you can tell that Baby's not very happy about being supplanted by a real baby. This all looks great and sweet, but what you don't know is my mother drank and my father ate, and they really struggled with addiction through their whole lives. That was likely due to the stress of raising a baby that no court had called their own. So I like to say that I basically spent my life trying to save my saviors. And this is another picture of my family unit. And it's a striking picture to me because I've got my head down and my face in my hands. And I'm sure that it was an innocent thing at the time, but now when I look at it, I think of like this little child saying, oh my God, this is supposed to be like of all the families I could have got, how did I get this one? And the other layer to this is that my grandfather was a very abusive man, and he beat my mother and his wife throughout their lives, and also verbally abused them. And a lot of that verbal abuse got passed down to me. And even though my grandmother and my adoptive father were very kind, loving people, they were also very passive, and they didn't stop or correct anything that was going on with that. So when I look at this picture, I do feel a lot for the little girl that's there. And now, can't tell the whole story. We're going to have to jump ahead by 15 years to teen mom me, which is not surprising with the family that I grew up in, and the fact that a lot of adopted young women grow up to try to correct the past. And I think that's what I did. I wanted to feel, most likely subconsciously, obviously, what it was like to be in my first mother's shoes, to have to make that decision. And I wanted to prove, I think, to myself or society that you actually can have a baby and keep it and be successful. But also, I just knew that there was no way I could live in a world where I didn't know my first mother and I didn't know my child. And I know that there are people in our community who did make that choice and have walked that path. And I really, honest to God, don't know how they did it, because I couldn't have. At the same time, my parents were very supportive of helping me keep this child. My mother saw my pregnancy as like her ability to live vicariously through watching me be a mom. So I had a lot of support. And also, the baby's father was my 32-year-old boss. And at the time, he was a very supportive father as well, even though it was quite creepy and predatory. He did not leave me holding the bag with the baby. And because of that, I didn't have to face the same sort of stark decisions that a lot of first mothers do. And I was able to keep her. And at this time, when I first saw her birth certificate, was when I pulled my own out and started thinking about the story. And that's when my curiosity search really got spiked. Not so much for the fact that, like, oh, my papers are not right. I was just worried that maybe I was a stolen child, and maybe my mom was out there worrying about me. And so that was really what got me started thinking I want to find my truth. So then you fast forward another 20 years, and all along the way, I've been gathering little facts, been doing research here and there. But at the time, I didn't have DNA. I didn't have the name I was using was never put on any legal documents whatsoever. My adoptive parents their names were on no legal documents. I obviously didn't know her name. I also didn't know my true birth date because my parents never got any paperwork to show when I was actually born, and admitted to me that they didn't even know what my birthday was. They just picked a day to celebrate. But even despite all of that, I was able to find my first mother, and how I did that is in my book. And then she led me, after a year of a lot of deception and lies and shame that was keeping her from telling me the truth. Eventually, she led me to my birth father. And at the time, I was in the fog. I hadn't done any kind of research on adoption or understanding adoption trauma, especially understanding birth mother trauma. So our relationship was pretty destined to fail from the get-go. But all of this led me, and there's still hope on the horizon there. That's a different story. But this led me, all these revelations obviously began to lift me out of the fog, and feelings that I never knew existed started coming up. And then that's when I started reading adoption books, and when I found the Adoption Knowledge Affiliates, and I met my first mom, who took me under her wing and, told me everything's going to be okay, and tried to help me negotiate my relationship with my first mom. But ultimately, I had spent 10 years in therapy thinking all my problems resolved around my dysfunctional adoptive family, but never thinking about the fact that it was because I was adopted. And then once all that clicked, I was able to start focusing my therapy in the right directions, and reading all the right books. And so as I began to understand my story, that's when I started processing it through writing. And so I started my first blog in 2012, and there is this cool machine called the Wayback Machine. And if you don't know about it, you can go and you can put in any website, and it'll show you what it looked like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, all the way back to the beginning of the internet. So this is my Wayback capture from 2012. And as you know, my website was still called My Adopted Life. But what you'll note here is I have Who in the World Am I? That's the great puzzle. This is a quote from Alice in Wonderland. So even then, I had begun to think of my journey as a parallel to Alice's fall down the rabbit hole, and a place where her identity and her reality were skewed, in a place where people didn't want to help her figure out who she was, where she came from, or how to get out. And so I really began to identify with this book, and I carried that forward over time. I initially named my book Black Market Baby, but then I changed it, and we'll share more about that in a minute. But I blogged here for about a year, and I wrote all kinds of crazy blog posts, and some I'm not proud of at all, but a lot that I was basically finding my voice and processing my trauma here. And then after about a year, I thought, well, I've got enough really cool articles and content that I can write a book. And it was a lot harder than I thought. And I learned a lot, because what I learned is a bunch of blog posts do not equal a memoir. They're very, very far from it. But the blogging taught me my voice, and the book really taught me the truth, because when you sit down to write a book, you realize quickly that you have to be fair, that you have to look at your story from all angles. I had to do my research about adoption trauma. I had to make sure that I understood how adoption had shaped my life, and how to separate the story that I had been told about me, to me, from my lived experience, and what that meant to me, and what I learned from it all. And that was a whole lot. Like, I didn't realize I was really taking on all of that when I first was like, I'm going to write a book. But then I did, and I was still early in my reunion with my first father, and he was my biggest proponent. And so he said, you want to write a book? This is awesome. He found me this beautiful writing cabin out where he lived in South Texas, invited me out there, and I started working on my story. I didn't know, and these, just to be clear, the house in the middle is not the same place as the house on the right. The house on the right is the first place I started writing. I wrote my first draft there in about 2 weeks. And since I was just maybe 3 or 4 months into getting to know my first father, he would come in the evenings and I would tell him all about what I wrote for the day. And that's sort of how we got to know each other through this. I would tell him stories and then I'd write the stories I shared with him the next day. And it was just a beautiful exchange of information at that time. But at that exact same time, I started getting all these pinged, seeing this one particular woman commenting on my husband's Facebook page. And that led to my discovery that this whole adoption reunion with my birth father had basically led to my husband having an affair. And he was basically in the throes of having the affair while I was working on this project. And I won't say that it caused the divorce, but I will say that if there was cracks in the foundation, the weight of this reunion, totally just made everything else give way. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was acting like a fool in reunion because I was having the first positive reunion I'd had. The one with my first mom hadn't gone so well. And so I was doing all the crazy adoption stuff that, you're just supposed to not do. But I was, and I'm not going to blame myself for the affair, but I do see how the situation contributed to it. But what that led to was I lost my job because of the whole like abandonment trauma, and that I still had not fully processed all of my abandonment issues. And this led to me having some abandonment issues. I lose my job. And so my first father says, well, I have this other cabin, and that's the cabin in the middle. And he says, move into it. Your grandmother used to live there. And, why don't you just come out here? You have no husband, no job, come out here and write. And that's what I did. But I was there for 2 weeks and 2 months, and it burnt to the ground. And he had put a bunch of money renovating it. It was just tragic. And what burned in it that was really hard was my delayed certificate of birth, which the state did not have a record of, and the passport that I had obtained with my delayed certificate of birth that I could not get a replacement for. And so it was at this time, I was about 40 years old, where proving my identity, proving that I existed in the system, and that I was born in the United States was, incredibly important. And it got elevated. And that's when my birth father and I started working on helping me get my birth certificate. But ultimately, I realized that my story was still continuing to unfold. So even though I thought I had written my story, I realized, like, wait a minute, I think I'm still in the middle of my story. And so I was still taking notes. I was anything that my birth father and I did, I was journaling about. And that was one of the hardest parts about this fire, is that I lost my entire life. I was a writer, a journaler, a diary person. I had 2 bookshelves full of journals and notes and family pictures. And I say that everything from my adopted life burned to ashes on the property of my birth father. And it really deconstructed me. And it set me back in writing the story. I had to take a step back. I had to realize that I had like even more layers of unprocessed adoption trauma. And I realized that I really can't keep writing until I've addressed all this loss that was bubbling up. And so I dealt with that, and the heat of that sort of deep internal reflection truly burned off any lingering fog that I had. And while it was a very dark place, it took me about 2 or 3 years to come out the other side of it. And unfortunately, like, my birth father was like, write the book, get back on the book, please write the book. What are you doing? You're being a sailboat person, he would say. And like, I was just, not really on any path. And I'm like, I just need space, right? I need to figure this stuff out. So then when I turned 50, I got it, that, oh, I'm 50. I need to do something. I need to get back on my path. And so I found a writing retreat in Costa Rica. And for my 50th birthday, I bought myself a ticket to go there. And this was just before COVID. And what do you know, sometimes when the powers that be, whatever your higher powers want you to be somewhere. This woman who leads this writing retreat, she is an adoptive mom, and she's from Canada, and she has an MFA, and she's written several books, including a young adult book, story about her daughter and her taking her daughter back to China to try to find her family. And I was hesitant to have an adoptive mom be counsel on my book and help me with my developmental edits on it. But in Canada, they give their adoptive parents a fantastic education on adoption trauma. And I was so surprised about how much she knew. And so I felt comfortable hiring her to be my editor. And so when we left this retreat, literally, like, we were headed to the airport and we were learning that other airports were shutting down because of COVID. So all throughout COVID, I worked with her online, and we went through 3 or 4 versions of my full draft. And I like to say she kind of gave me a mini MFA, and she still does writing retreats in both in Costa Rica and Mexico, and also in England. They're really affordable compared to the other writing retreats that are out there. And if anybody wants to go down that path, I would love to introduce you. I've actually thought about reaching out to her and some other folks in the community and offering a constellation focused writing retreat in a place like this. But that's sort of like for way down the road. I have way too many things on my plate right now, but this is an example of I'm just following my path toward where my heart leads me, toward the stories that I want to tell and the things I want to do to help share my story with the world. And this talk is going to venture into how I can, how ideas for how you can get involved and look at your life and figure out how you want to materialize these things into your life and the work that you're doing. But let me just continue on a little bit more about this story, and we'll get there. So once I worked with her, I spent 2 more years polishing and pitching my manuscript. And they told me it was going to be hard and that there was going to be a lot of rejection. And there was. I was told that my platform was too small, that the story was too niche, that it was not marketable, that the stakes were not high enough. I like not having any identity or being able to prove that you were born in this country is not high enough stakes. I don't know. And that it was too dark, obviously, because adoption stories are not supposed to be dark. But I was still plowing through, like, yes, I'm still just, they say that, J.K. Rowling, she got like 500 rejection letters before they took her book. So I was just, keeping at it. And then my birth father passed away, and he passed away on November the 3rd. And some of you who are online may have seen that I did a little post about that. It really broke my heart that he died before he saw the book come out. And, I feel horrible about that. But, what can you do? That slowed down my process quite a bit. And I took a break, but I did continue querying because it also reinforced my determination to get this book out, because he was really afraid that I never would. And so as I continued to query, I started getting placed on short lists. There's long lists, and you're really excited about the long list, and they put you on the short list. And so mine ended up being on 2 short lists and a finalist for a contest in New Orleans that I didn't include here. But anyway, I was getting a lot of recognition. Some agents were asking me for full manuscripts. And so I'm like, okay, yes, I'm so close. I just have to hang in there. So I hung in there for a whole nother year. And one agent took my manuscript, asked for a full manuscript, and had it for 8 months before they got back to me and told me, yeah, it was so interesting. I just don't think I can sell it. So it's a very long, grueling path. And at some point, you just feel like you could stay on it forever. But something in me just would not give up. And so I kept going back. I kept trying again. But this time, the longer it got, the harder all of these rejections became. And I started realizing, how long am I going to do this? And my boss, who I've had a working relationship with for 20 years, he kept telling me, look, he'd published Big 5 books, and he'd published with Big 5, like Simon & Schuster, and he also self-published. And he's like, what is taking you so long? Just put that book in the world, girl. Why do you need some third party to validate you? And I started thinking about that, and I thought about it very hard. And I realized that there was a rejection connection, that this was about my adoption wounds. And I want to underscore that, like, no matter how healed you are, things keep coming up and you keep realizing like, oh, there's this other little thing that still found a way to worm itself deep inside me and is going to mess with me at any given moment. And it was about the fact that all this rejection just made me to want even harder to have someone validate my worth, validate that my story was good, that I was worth, that it was worth my time, worth their time, that to validate that adoption matters. And I realized that my quest for a real publisher was an echo of adoption's deepest wounds. You know, the belief that we are just never good enough, that we need permission to exist, and that we need validation to matter. And when that sunk in, that when I was like, okay, no, I don't want to ride this ride anymore. So I took control, and I realized that giving the gatekeepers the power meant I was losing my own. And as a adoptee, we all understand what it's like to not have control over our own stories. And then I realized indie publishing really did give me that control over my timeline, over my story, over my cover, and over my truth. And it's funny because people will tell you things, and if you're not ready to hear it, you just won't hear it. And so like a year before that, I had met Monica Hall right when her book, Practically Still a Virgin, was coming out. And it was a gorgeous book. And it was just so professionally done, looked beautiful. And she said, like, she never had 1 minute of a doubt that she was going to do it herself. She's like, I'm an adoptee, I'm a control freak, I'm a perfectionist, and I don't want to give anybody control over yanking paragraphs out of my story, taking out things that make them feel uncomfortable. I want control over my cover, I want control over my timeline. And I heard her and I thought, wow, that's really courageous. But I was like, but oh no, you know, I really need somebody to tell me that mine is good enough. And that's when I realized that actually all along, my whole community had been telling me that my story was good enough. I had had multiple beta readers read the whole book and tell me, wow, this is great, love it, stayed up all night reading it. Patricia, I underlined so many things, it was so good. And yet I was like, yeah, but you know, you're us, you're not them. I need them to tell me it's okay. And then I realized I don't need them. And as long as we keep waiting for them to give us permission to tell our stories will not get out there. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, it was about saying that as whatever you're wanting to do and however you're wanting to reach out into the world and inform people about adoption trauma, that you truly need to just take the bull by the horns and do it, and don't wait for permission, and don't wait for validation from these people who really just don't understand the narrative. And it's our job to educate them. So that's when I decided to go ahead and come out and say, Wonderland is coming out on April the 1st of 2026. And that is my birth father's birthday. He was born on April Fool's Day. And I also think that April Fool's is a great day to put out a book, especially about adoption, because it is a big joke, right? And there's so many things about it that you just got to joke about. So this is something that's very exciting. I'm not going to take a long time with it, but I have just received, or I've been working with a cover designer, and I've been trying to figure out what cover I want to put on the book. Monica Hall did something like this. She put out her covers and let people vote on them. And so I'm going to be doing the same thing. Nobody has seen these other than you guys are about to see them right now. And here they are. And if you sign up to my launch list, I'm going to send out a poll in a couple weeks. These are rough drafts. I'm not very happy with the pink tint on this one. There's things I want to change about this one because I wanted to say Patricia Knight Meyer. And anyway, they're just rough drafts. But what I want feedback on is which one grabs you. Like if you didn't know anything about my story, if you were on Amazon and you were looking, which cover do you think is just the cover that's going to get people to pick it up and read it, especially people that aren't part of our community, because that's the goal, is to get outside of our echo chamber as well. So I encourage you to please sign up. And in addition to that, you know, you'll get notices about my speaking events and giveaways and things like that too. So you can go on my website and you can subscribe to the launch list, or you can do it here with this QR code. The recording will be on YouTube. But let's get back to what I'm talking about, that we cannot wait for permission. And we cannot get, we can't rely on mainstream media to ever really understand our story. And we have to enter spaces where false narratives are being told, whether we have permission to or not. And I felt like I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge some of these false narratives and look at a couple of them and the kind of the battle that we're up against. And it's kind of heavy and dark, but I'm going to try to bring a little humor into it as well. So I just did a real quick search online and I immediately found these. The first one is about, a mother after a young daughter's death adopts a child. And I was just like, what? What agency would let that happen? This poor child. So a little micro way that you can practice advocacy is to write a letter to whoever put this online and tell them why this is not okay. And that's just, it's nothing you have to do publicly. It's just something that you can do that I think if we all did enough of it, it could begin to at least maybe make them consider to invite us to share our story or share our perspective. You never know. The funny part, I look at this is this Care 11, which has a peacock on it, looks a lot like Karen. And no offense to any Karens that might be here or watch this later, but I do think it's kind of funny that it looks like Karen. Also, the Daily Universe thinks that open adoption is the perfect option. And, yay for them, they can rhyme. It made me think that I can rhyme too. And so I want to say open adoption is a ploy to destroy, or open adoption is a lie in disguise. So again, this was positioned as an editorial. I would want to pitch another editorial with my different opinion on this. And these are little things that we can do. Also, who knew there was such a thing as pregnancy help news? This is just so freaking ridiculous. And I was thinking, who wants to launch a website called Adoption Trauma News? Because we know there's plenty of true news that we could put on a station like that. And those are all big things, right? Those are big things that you can do. But it's, but as far as launching new websites, but you can also just comment on all these articles and write letters to editors and hopefully get a little fair and balanced journalism, maybe in the process. You don't know, but you can try. And then the last one is just, I just came across both of these at the same time. One mom adopted 8 kids in 14 years, and she's very proud of that. And I think she wants to win a contest or something, but she will be outdone by the lady in Arkansas that adopted 28 children. And whoever these editors are that think 28 children being adopted in the same home is some kind of special story, they also need to hear from us. So I would encourage, anytime you see something like that in the media, even just a letter or commenting, it's not doing nothing. It's not ignoring it and letting it grow. So the false narratives need our help. And I want to invite you to think about what special knowledge or skills or talent that you can bring. And it really doesn't, the medium doesn't matter. It's about us banding together to reclaim our truth and change the narrative. And where do you start with that? You start by just sitting down and making a list of what comes easy and natural to you. Over time, you'll do things and you'll figure out oh, I liked that. That was inspiring to me. I feel comfortable doing that. And that's the first place to start. And I have more ways of looking into that and figuring that out that we'll talk about in just a minute. But right now, I want to focus on the superstars in our community that are doing it really well, and what we can learn from them, and also how we can elevate what they're doing and share the news about what they're doing, because together we can really help them reach new audiences and get outside of our own echo chambers. So the first set of folks we all know very well. I am one of them, a writer and a blogger. But even if you're not a big time writer, right? If you're just interested in writing, you can start by joining a constellation writing group. And you don't have to share what you write with anybody, but initially you will find your voice. And sometimes that leads to people in these writing groups. They get to publish what they wrote in an adoptee anthology that comes out of those writing groups. Sometimes they end up posting guest blog pieces. Adoption Knowledge Affiliates accepts guest blog posts and guest poetry posts. If you just write something and you love it and you want to send it to them, you can do something like that. You can pitch things to your local magazines or local papers. And then if you are more into writing and you start getting really involved in it, you can do things like Candace leads writing workshops at Cub. She led a writing workshop in the morning. So there's that. The next thing that we see a lot in our community is these social media mavens and these podcast hosts, and there are a lot of them, and they do a really, really great job. If you're not a big social media star, if you're not a podcast, I mean, running a podcast takes a lot of time. And if you're not ready to share your story on podcasts, then you can certainly help just by commenting on their stories, liking their stories, and sharing their stories. And I think that's the thing I want to enforce the most, is that advocacy also to me means raising the people up who are doing a lot of the work in our community and making sure that we try to push it beyond our circles, but into our more private social media channels, or email a piece to a family member or something like that, or a friend who doesn't quite get it. I do want to call out Abby Johnson, because she's a perfect example of someone who thought, like, she didn't plan to be a social media rock star. She just had a truth one afternoon about how horribly wrong her open adoption was going. She got really vulnerable. She put it on TikTok, and then it exploded. And then the next thing you know, she's got a 6-series episode on Liberty Lost, which is a podcast. It's new to me. I don't know if it's been out there for a while, but it was produced by somebody named TJ Raphael. And TJ is not connected to the community, but she was very interested in what was going on with these Jerry Falwell maternity homes. And this was a place that Abby was sent, and she ended up doing the 6-series episode, and this has won awards. And so this is the type of piece that I would send to a friend of mine who's a therapist, but she's not an adoption informed therapist, and say, hey, take a listen to this. Like, this is something that we can use to educate other people with about. And if you haven't heard it, I really, really encourage you to dig into it, because it's absolutely fantastic. And I got to keep going because I got a lot of these. Artists and designers, any of the organizations that are in our community, and I have a list of them at the end of this presentation, they would love to have people who are artists and designers reach out to them and offer to do things like t-shirts, banners, social media advertisements, help with any kind of artwork that they have for events that are coming up. But in addition to that, adoptees or first parents that are anyone in the constellation that is an artist could get together and create an art exhibit to raise awareness in public spaces in their neighborhoods or in their local art museums. They can lead art classes for adoptees in person, or for the, I should say, for the constellation, in person or online. And there are a lot of people in our, if you just search art classes adoptees, you will find a list of people who offer these even online classes. So that's definitely something that you can do. And then the next are event planners. Yeah, it's not fancy or anything, but if you have skills at event planning, organizations like NAAP and Cub and AKA and Untaming Our Roots, you know, you can help with them pre-event planning. You can show up and help organize the event. You can help wrap things up. You can do follow-up stuff with events. Just reach out and say, hey, you know, I can only volunteer like once a month, or, you know, once a quarter, or maybe even just once a year, but I know about event planning. So what help do you need? What do you need help with? And I'm sure it would be incredibly valued. the next thing are the researchers and the academics that are in our community. Gretchen Sisson, her book Relinquished, and her research that the book holds in it is just pivotal. And she came up with her research came up with like one, I mean, there's so many things that you could quote from her book, but one of them was $1,000 it could be the difference between a first mother ability to keep her child or relinquish. And that kind of little blurb gets media attention. And she's done a rock star job of getting publicity, even though she also is not part of the constellation. And so when researchers are out there doing this kind of work for us, it's important that we read their work, that we get their stats, and that we share them on all of our social channels, or we put them in whatever kind of newsletters that we're sending out, any ways that we're trying to educate our followers and the people that we know. This is a great way to start a conversation, because you say something like that and people are like, really? And then you can continue from there. Jean Widner just put out The Adoption Paradox, and she filled that book full of adoption studies and research that other people have done. And so by taking that work and pushing it forward and just taking it into tiny chunks and putting it in social posts or whatever, that I think that's a really great form of advocacy as well. And then this is like where you get really true deep down into advocacy, that there are the folks that show up at our state capitals and push for open adoption, open records and adoptees' rights to access their information. An example of an organization like this is Texas Star, Support Texas Adoptee Rights. They are still struggling in Texas with that. I don't think that organizations like this exist in every state, but I believe there are some. And if there isn't one in your state, you could probably look to those that are established and ask them what their path was for creating something like that in the state where you are. In addition, if you don't know about Saving Our Sisters, these two ladies and many other people that work with them use legal channels and people who understand who are lawyers and such to make sure that they help first mothers who are at the precipice of deciding that maybe they changed their mind and they don't want to relinquish and the window is still open, or maybe it just closed, and they really go in like a SWAT team and try to help these women keep their babies. And when I think about the work that they do, I think that it's got to be so incredibly heartbreaking sometimes, but also so fulfilling when you see that like you really made a difference in that family's life. So that's the kind of thing that if I had the time, I would certainly support. And I encourage, if you're interested in anything like that, that's the way to go. And then if you're more like a get out in the streets and shout kind of person, take a feather from Zara Phillips' hat. She's also a fantastic performer. But she was a part of, and I don't know if she was a part of this or if she actually planned it, but she did the forced adoption apology protest in the UK. And this got covered on the national news, or the like big time news over there. And it is a big thing. And I think that we need some of these in the United States. I think that we could use Adoptee Remembrance Day as a great day to walk in the streets with pictures of adoptees who've passed in the hands of their caregivers. And also I've thought about, when we have big conferences, that we could plan a day or a period before or after where we all get together and organize a protest, because, hey, we all come together for conferences. And this is also in my list of things, like if I had time or if I was independently wealthy, this is definitely something that I would be excited to take part in, because this is truly, bring it to the streets, get in the face of people who really don't know anything about it. Also, if you are working in mental health fields, or if you're a healing worker, Amy Barker is an example of a therapist who offers adoption-informed therapy, but you can also be an advocate for making sure that adoption competency counseling and training is something that is offered in the organizations with your peer groups as therapists. And if you are more of a natural healer, like Lorraine, she's like known as the adoptee chameleon. She has Kundalini classes online. So if you're into sound baths, if you're into meditation, if you're into ayahuasca and you want to show up and talk about those things, or even like lead a yoga class at a conference, that's something to approach conferences about, because they do, like, I think that Untangling Our Roots has a yoga session or a meditation session. I know that Cub had a journaling session. So if you have those kinds of talents, you can approach the organizations to lead people in something like that. And then we kind of get to the rock stars in our community, these super talented performers and filmmakers that have such amazing talent. And, you know, not all of us can do that. It takes an insane amount of time, effort, and energy to do these things. And so what we can do for all these super talented people is to watch their shows, you know, rate them on Netflix, let Netflix and all of these, you know, platforms know we want more of these stories, thumb them up, and get our family and friends to attend them, to watch them. And if you don't know, Zara Phillips, Somebody's Daughter, is on Netflix now. So you can go watch that. And Lisa Scott's documentary is in the works and it'll be out soon. The other option, you know, I'm going to put myself in there at some point, is public speaking. And that it's scary for sure. And but I learned quickly doing it that if you just are genuine and you have an interesting story to tell, no two stories are alike, and everybody's story matters. And spaces like NAAP make space for people to come online and share their stories. And so it doesn't have to be this big, intimidating thing. You just get up and you just tell your story. And actually, just recently at Cub, there was a storytelling hour. And I didn't know that it was supposed to be done moth style, and that you can't just come up. I was going to read an excerpt from my book because the prior year that was fine. And I get up there and Amy Seek, who had organized the thing, was like, "Oh no, Patricia, you need to put that down. You just need to stand up here and tell your story." And I was terrified. I mean, because even here I have notes on the screen, right? But it's a really empowering experience to do that, and to just speak from the heart. And I think when you allow yourself to do that, you become vulnerable, and through that vulnerability, you heal a little bit, because all the people in the community, they just lift you up and hug you and tell you that, you know, you did a great job, and it's a wonderful experience. So if you can get past being scared and dive into the vulnerability of it, it's a really rewarding thing. And so I appreciate NAAP giving me a platform to do that here today. If you're more of the introverted type, you could take some tips from Tony Corsentino. If you don't know who he is, he's a librarian and an archivist. And he also has a blog about adoption. He writes a lot about more of the he has some activism type things that he writes about. But in general, librarians and archivists can curate adoption book collections. They can host author discussions. They can get other librarians in their area to do the same. And you don't have to be a librarian to create this. You can go talk to your local librarian about National Adoption Awareness Month, and you can get them a little slight education, like maybe with some of Gretchen Syson's facts, and say, wouldn't it be great if we had something like this, an event at the library? So they're a great resource for trying to build awareness, as well as our local booksellers that you can approach, and just as a consumer, and say, no, I'd really like to see something like this. And then lastly, if you're really interested in genealogy and DNA Angels, I'm sure they have interest in having volunteers to help them out. And I've always thought that would also be a super cool thing to help people do, and very rewarding if you could help put family together. So now that we've seen the rock stars and what they're doing, we're going to take just a few seconds to look at you and what you can think about to figure out what you might want to do. And the key is just to take an inventory of your own unique abilities. But the difference is it's not like you're applying for a job. With a job, you have to do things you don't like, and you get to do a few things you do like. In this work, you can truly just do the things that you rock at, the things that you love, the things that give you energy, and not the things that drain you, and the things that come naturally to you. I mean, you can look at the sorts of things like, well, I'm really good at this, and I know how to take big complex things and boil them down into just a few words. Well, then that's one of your skill sets. But the nice thing is you really do just get to look at the areas where you shine and then figure out how to apply those to what's out there in the community that is curious for you. So I like to say, ask yourself, where does your anger or grief meet your hope? And for me, I always said I was going to write a book once I had a story to tell, and I did that. But the other thing was, every time I walked into a greeting, like Walgreens, to buy a greeting card, I would get angry, and sometimes I would cry because there were no greeting cards that told our stories. And if you go on Amazon and you search adoptee gift card, greeting card, you see all of these happy adoption day, congratulations on your new baby, blood is not thicker than water, anyway, the sappy saccharine forever family cards. And I started thinking, how can I disrupt that narrative? How can I get my message into places where people are least expecting it and where gatekeepers don't really have any control? And what I found was I can do that in the greeting card aisle by creating genetic greeting cards that I branded Yay DNA. So if you were to go on Amazon, you can search Yay DNA genetic greeting cards. And what I also realized is I can't do all these by myself. I did all these by myself. I did some of them with AI. I hired a graphic designer to do some of the other ones. But then I thought about it, and I had some people, some adoptees and first moms come to me and say, oh, I've always thought about that, and I have so many ideas for cards. And then that's when I realized this can be a community co-op thing. I actually want to pair people in the community that love to write, have poetry, have ideas for cards, with artists in our community that want to design cards, and let them work together on it. And then we'll still publish them in the ADNA space on Amazon and on our Etsy store. And of course, all the benefits, the proceeds can go back to the awareness. Now, it costs a lot to have an Etsy store and an Amazon. It's like basically about $100 a month. I'm not making any money on these cards. But what I really want to do is just make people stop and think when they're cruising through Amazon and they're looking for an adoptee birthday card, and they come to something like this that says, adoptee birthdays can bring up complex feelings, grief, wonder, loss, and so many questions all tangled together. Remember, you can love the family who raised you and wonder about the family who didn't. You can embrace your life and grieve what was lost. You can celebrate your birthday and acknowledge the difficult feelings it brings. So if somebody reads this, they're going to be like, oh, wait a minute, adoptees have complex feelings on their birthday? Really? And maybe if they know an adoptee, they'll begin a conversation with them. And that's my goal for these cards. If people buy them, that's great. But even if I just make people cruising around stop and think, or scratch their head a little bit, that makes me happy. So I'm going to show you a few other ones that are out there. We've got a genetic mirroring card. I also have a male version of this, but this is basically, you could give this to after reuniting with anyone, a mother, an aunt, a father, an uncle, a cousin, anyone that looks like you. This is the card to say, thank you for being my genetic mirror. The first time I saw you, I finally saw myself. I've done some for DNA discovery. And these I try to keep light because, we walk on eggshells initially. And, so you don't want to overwhelm somebody. But this is the idea of, oh, I found somebody, and now I'm really excited that we have this connection. And I just want to say, I'm so glad I found you and wish I hadn't waited so long. And again, these are the kind of cards somebody sees and like, oh yeah, that kind of stuff happens to people, right? Found family. This is nature versus nurture, kind of a lighthearted approach to it. And then we have Birth Mother's Day card that we missed many years together. Time could never erase what matters. Your courage lives in my determination, your heart in my compassion, your strength in my own. I'm so glad we found each other. The Birth Father card talks about our stars aligning. I'm so thankful for the chance to know you, the man whose DNA has shaped me all along. We shared the same sky, the same clouds, the same moon, that sort of thing. And then lastly, this would be a card that someone who is in the family and has been found, they suddenly find out, oh, we have a family member we didn't know about. There's always that one family member who's so excited that you have been found. And then there's the other ones that are like, I don't know. But the one that's excited you have been found would send a card like this that says, turns out the family skeleton wasn't actually in the closet. So glad you rattled some bones. Not all secrets should stay that way. So just a fun way to welcome somebody into the new family. So the way you can get involved in this, and I've sort of explained it already, is constellation members send card ideas to me. I pair you with an artist who's interested in doing the work. I actually have one graphic artist who is an adoptee and a therapist who has volunteered. I thought she was going to be here. Her name's Jamie Kelly, but I didn't see her here. She said she was going to try to come, you never know. But she is involved in the project and we are looking for more. And I want to pair these folks up. And then on the back of the card, I want to say, this card was written by an adoptee and illustrated by first mother, whatever. And it doesn't always have to be that pairing. It could be two adoptees or two first parents, who knows. But that's what we want to do. And proceeds will support constellation events. Now, we talked about the organizations that you can offer your special talents to. This is a very small set of people. I'm sure there's more that belong on here. If you know of some and you think you wanted me to add this to the slide, I will, because I'm sure this isn't the last time I'm going to use this slide. But these Adoption Knowledge Affiliates, NAAP, which obviously we know, Concerned United Birth Parents, CUB, DNA Angels, Untangling Our Roots, Right to Know, and SOS. Those are the ones that are on my radar, but I'm sure there are others. And like I said, I'd be happy to add them. The one last thing that I've got going on is I have a 47-page ebook that explores, I based it off of a presentation that I did on healing my own adoption wounds, how I dealt with my adoption trauma, and the steps I took to become like my truly most healed, authentic self. And I've created this book and it's free. You will get it as a link if you subscribe to the book launch list. If you don't want to be on the book launch list and you just want this, you can just subscribe to my basic website subscription newsletter. Either way, both subscriptions have this book and it's free for anybody. It's downloadable. You can read it online or you can download it. And it's just welcome for you to have it. And then I'm going to leave you with the questions. Like, think about as you move through your journey, what story are you wanting to tell, and what space do you want to disrupt, and what narrative do you want to change? And then of course I've included the last slide, which is just a compilation of all the ways that you can find me. My socials are on direct.me. It's got links to just about everything. It's like a link tree or whatever. And then I will be speaking at Untangling Our Roots, doing a memoir writing workshop in the spring in Atlanta. And so I'd love to see you there. And that completes my presentation. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patricia. That was awesome. Awesome. What we're going to do right now is we are going to go ahead and stop the recording and open it up to some questions, if that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first.